Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, yeah, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, good. It's my pleasure to greet you at this conference. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in it, and I think we're going to have a very important and very topical subject to discuss today. It is the state of the contemporary world and the details of political picture in both in global way and in local way. We have very interesting subjects for discussions, and we have very interesting presentations that our participants have prepared. I appreciate very much that we have about 7 people in the first session of our panel that will consist of 2 parts. Globe goes crazy as the world turns upside down. In the first session, we'll have 7 reports, 7 presentations by young thinkers who are doing very interesting and topical reports. It's my pleasure to introduce you the expert who will start our today's presentation, Julian Nageli, who is an very experienced specialist in foreign affairs. He lives in Prague, and he worked as Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty correspondent in the Balkans during the war that, as you know, took place there in the beginning of the 90s. He also worked as a political officer at the United Nations mission in Kosovo, which is also a very controversial place in the world politics. Julian, are you here? Julian, are you here? I don't see Julian. Okay, if Julian could not join us at this time, we will give him a floor a little bit later. And at this time, we would start with our first presentation by Anastasia Savchinskaya. Anastasia, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. So your report will be the first. Probably it will be the challenging and difficult report to begin with. But you have 8 minutes, and every participant of our today's panel will have 8 minutes to speak. After that, we will decide whether we would like to ask questions after the presentation immediately, or we will ask questions when the whole session will be finished. What's your idea? Well, I think we would have a couple of questions after each presentation and after each report. So the first report is how to withstand the spreading process of social and political atomization. Anastasia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So, hello, my name is Anastasia Savchinskaya. I'm a third-year student of IBS, and I would like to elaborate on this topic of separation of social fabric. Obviously, in medieval and early modernity was the basic unit of the society. Due to the lack of communication and transportation technologies, this was not possible to a person to live securely and independently in their community. However, today we've grown into atomized society, creating a system for individuals, but not for the community. Next, please. Thank you. So, what is actually atomization? Atomization of society means disintegration of ties in society, social disunity, isolation of individuals from each other, whose social connections and contacts are predominantly personal and rational. So, atomization is expressed in a significant decrease in trust between people, skills for collective problem solving and towards the possibility of such interaction intensification. Next, please. So, atomization leads to the massivization of society, which means that society tends to be turned into a mass of people, just a set of people similar to each other, tend to be expressed spontaneously and can be triggered easily. So, since everyone is similar to each other, the dissolution and disappearance of individuality and personality occurs. Mass is opposed to sometimes to equal element, so it is whether the mass elite dichotomy or mass against mass or mass behavior against non-mass behavior and so on. So this leads to the anarchy. So people surge into streets and can be brought together by internet into large temporary groups. So consequently, it may result in huge internal conflicts and crises like Arab Spring, protests in Hong Kong, and so on. However, the atomized person still has a need for association and affiliation with others, and as a consequence, the popularity of various radical movements may occur. And in this situation where there is no other community or where a person can meet these needs, so therefore there is a rise in movements of various neo-fundamentalists and so forth. So in addition, the dissolution and the disappearance of personality in the mass and the mechanistic nature of social contacts leads to the search for an identity and for violent protection and defense of it. So these identities can be national, religious, gender, and so on. All this leads to the destabilization of both the situation inside the country and worldwide. So gradual atomization might start to have an impact on macro level and influence global community. Thus, the destructive forces may cause some setbacks of integration processes. Therefore, this may lead to global disorder. And the current situation within the EU caused by the pandemic can be considered as the example of such atomization in terms of international relations. So, from the beginning of these difficult times, countries, instead of joining together resources to fight against these global threats, but they only isolated themselves from each other, closed the borders, and began to compete primarily for the creation of a vaccine or then the purchase of manufactured samples. Next, please. So such atomization has been a result of many factors. And first of them is individualism. The next slide, please. So individualism is common for Western societies, and we can see this being illustrated by World Value Survey. As you can see, the most of the Western countries hold mostly to secular values, which are less emphasis on religion and traditional family values, and self-expression values, which give high priority to environmental protection, growing tolerance to foreigners, and so on. So, next slide, please. So, the underlying cause of the atomization that encourages the development in the Western world is liberalism, and that posits that individual autonomy and equality between individuals are the two most important and ultimate moral values. So economic, political, legal matters are resolved with the individual in mind, and individualist ideology naturally produces individualist behavior. So people are raised to believe their choices are invaluable as long as they're not harming anyone else. So in this case concerns for collective goals, which sometimes require self-sacrifice and harm to those outside the community, quickly dissipate. So liberalism breeds individualism, resulting in a society of atomized individuals. So the next one is globalization and the joint effects of technology, principles of modern citizenship, and relatively open borders as they were before the pandemic. So give people ability to decide where to live, which nation to align. So individuals become accustomed to frequently moving and breaking ties with their community of birth, and this results in lack of deep links to any singular culture. So the result is absence of a clear and permanent identity, without which the individual cannot truly belong to any community. The third factor is growing role of the state, which contributes to atomization as well as since state takes upon itself many functions of the family, so caring for children, elderly people, social support, caring for people with disabilities, and etc. Therefore, the model when it takes a village to raise a child is not the case anymore, and eventually ties with the extended family are being cut off, and there is living only the nuclear family. So last but not least is social media and internet. Social media was intended to enhance communication between people. However, it reduced direct face-to-face contact within the society and even within family. So moreover, tailored feed and targeted content create information bubble and creates possibility to isolate people from the group and fixate on a group of loyal people who share the same views while completely rejecting alternative opinion. So next slide, please. However, social media messages, provide opposite effect as well. So these technologies allow revitalize communication with the extended family. Moreover, instead, increased transparency by these technologies provide provides possibility impossible, makes it almost impossible to cut off all the social ties and start in a completely new life, because there is still going to be a digital footprint. So in addition, aging population with the predominance of women as a demographic group leads to a gradual turn towards traditional values, family values, popularity is increasing. So therefore, the sustainability of family ties is being restored. These trends allow with steady atomization. However, the process may be speeded up by involving institutions first and foremost, school as institute, because education and upbringing play a key role in promoting social integration and enhancing dialogue from childhood onward. So next slide, and thank you for your attention. If you have any questions.
Anastasia, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I have a question to you. How would you characterize the process of atomization as related to Russian affairs? Is it typical for Russian Federation, or it's more typical for Western society like United States or Western Europe? And as applied to Russia, how would you characterize it?
Thank you for your question. I think yes, it is fair to say that we experience as Russians atomization as well, and it is connected with our post-Soviet, so to say, heritage. We are atomized, and this is a huge problem. But as I've researched, especially regarding the World Value Survey map, we tend to overcome this atomization since there is an increase of popularity of traditional values. So I think, yes, it is fair to say that we are automized by tradition. And so, yeah, that's what would I say.
Do you see the difference in atomization between urban and rural Russia?
I think it's not that evident. Probably urban Russia tends to be automized more because of some kind of individualism, whereas rural Russia is mostly affected by this post-Soviet heritage. But I think this the line is not that distinctive, and I think the urban atomization in Russia doesn't differ so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience? Please don't be shy. I think that our presenter today would be interested to have questions. Okay, if we don't have more questions, I just got a message that Julian had chance finally to join us, and I would introduce him one more time before we go to the next presentation. I would like to thank Anastasia for her very interesting presentation. So we'll have Julian Nagli, who is living in Prague and who is a specialist in foreign affairs. He worked as Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty correspondent in the Balkans during the war in the Balkans in the beginning of the 90s. And then he worked as a diplomat in Kosovo as part of United Nations mission in Kosovo, where he served as a political officer. Julian, are you here? Could you hear me?
I hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Very good.
Great to see you.
Good to see you again.
So if you could express some thoughts that you would like to share with our participants, I would appreciate it. And the floor is yours for about 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Piotr. Okay, over the next quarter of an hour, I'm going to share a few thoughts and suggestions with all of you about the lessons I've learned in the field of international relations since I received my master's degree almost 43 years ago. On my last weekend at Johns Hopkins SAIS in Washington, I attended a seminar to prepare fresh graduates for planning their careers. We received a rather morbid homework assignment. For Saturday night, we were asked to write out our own obituaries, assuming we would live until well after retirement. Of course, as one grows up and reaches adulthood, one has dreams, imagines how one will work one's way up in the diplomatic service to the post of ambassador or work for an influential news medium as foreign correspondent or in a successful international business. But writing one's own obituary is a sobering exercise, which I highly recommend to all of you. And I've recommended this to my staffers in the past and to people that I've interviewed, it's an incredibly good lesson. It's as good as going to a psychotherapist, frankly, or better, because it forces one to focus on what it is that we want to achieve, what difference we want to make in the world. It's not about titles so much as about tangible impact. Do you want to help change the world and make it better? Or do you want to be just a cog in the wheel of bureaucracy, blindly carrying out tasks, serving bosses one barely knows for often less than clear interests and goals? Of course, the experience of working in a bureaucracy or a large company is invaluable, but it need not, nor should it be, an end in itself. The jobs I most enjoyed were the ones in which I had the most freedom, obviously, in which I felt that my personal contribution through thorough historical background knowledge, competence in foreign languages, and familiarity with the key figures gave me insights and a degree of understanding, a sufficient grounding so that I could interact intelligently with interlocutors and draft comprehensive, intelligible reports. This served me very well throughout my career. And I would add here that first working as a journalist and then going into diplomacy was extremely good preparation. It gave me a competitive edge that my colleagues who had not worked as journalists lacked. They could not write quickly, they could not write concisely, and they couldn't write well for the most part. One great piece of advice I received when I started at the Voice of America in 1984 was know your audience. That is, who is on the receiving end of your reports? What is it that they want to know and need to know? And that applied just as well at the United Nations as at Radio Free Europe or Voice of America. Another key piece of advice I received at the time was never speak down to your audience. That is, always assume that the reader or listener knows at least as much as you do about the topic at hand. They may well know more. You may only be filling in gaps, or you may be educating them, as I found over and over at the VOA. As I found over and over at the UN. In the course of my 10 years as a correspondent with Voice for America, and subsequently during the 7 years at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and especially during the 14 years at the UN, I learned that knowledge and information are invaluable, powerful tools when communicating with those living in closed or partially closed societies where free media is either lacking or faces considerable restrictions. Without my ability to speak Russian, German, Czech, Slovak, Polish, and other languages, I could not have amassed the wealth of knowledge or developed the contacts and insights I had during the collapse of communist rule in Eastern Europe and during the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia. It was neither easy nor fun, rather a stressful and at times unpleasant or even dangerous time, marked by nearly constant surveillance, violently suppressed demonstrations, thoroughly compromised and dishonest party or state-controlled news media. But it gave me a front row seat to witnessing history. During a visit by Pope John Paul II to Gdansk in June 1987, while I was waiting for a tram after a mass for several 100,000 Poles, I witnessed a spontaneous clash between solidarity protesters and riot police, in which the protesters chanted, "Nie bij Polaka, bądź Polakiem." Don't beat a Pole, be a Pole. 2 years later, Poles voted in the first free and fair elections since before the Second World War. I was there for the elections, and 99 out of 100 seats in the Polish Senate, the upper house, were won by Solidarity, which brought to mind Stalin's notorious remark from 1943, how many divisions does the Pope have? While watching the tediously slow process of democratization in the Hungarian parliament, which eventually led to the legalization of political pluralism, during one debate, a fellow foreign correspondent remarked to me, "Democracy is boring." Yet on March 15th, 1989, the Speaker of the Hungarian Parliament, Mátyás Szűrös, stood on a balcony of the ornate Hungarian Parliament building and declared Hungary a republic without adjectives, i.e. no longer a people's republic. And he quoted from the country's national anthem, "God protect Hungary, for she has suffered long enough." There was not a dry eye in the square, which was filled with 100,000 people who had showed up during their lunch break to witness this event. I went back to my hotel room to report on what I'd just witnessed. But before I did, I wept. Because Hungary, in my view at that moment, had succeeded in ending more than 4 decades of servitude. But the rest of the region, to the north, south, and above all to the east, was nowhere near that point. A few months later, 1 month later, in response to false information disseminated by the Czechoslovak secret police that a student had been killed in a demonstration in Prague on November 17th, 1989, Czechs and Slovaks demonstrated night after night in ever larger numbers, demanding freedom, free elections, the withdrawal of all Soviet forces, and within days, the Czechoslovak Communist Party Politburo resigned. Soon after, the constitutional clause guaranteeing the Communist Party the leading role in society was abrogated. And 2 so-called non-persons, Alexander Dubček, Czechoslovakia's leader in 1968, and dissident writer Václav Havel, were elected respectively president of or speaker of the parliament and president of the country. I had repeatedly interviewed Dubček and Havel in the years leading up to this moment, informing Czechs, Slovaks, Russians, and many others of Voice of America's 120 million listeners worldwide about these supposed non-persons, while satisfying my own intellectual curiosity. And it was a feeling that I had somehow, in some way, small or big, played a role. I can say without much exaggeration that I was a witness to miracles as well as to history in the making. The risks entailed disseminating objective, unbiased information are regrettably once again considerable in many countries, notably in many of those which gained their freedom from tyranny some 3 decades ago. In this connection, I cannot overemphasize the importance of speaking truth to power. There is no such thing as a provocative question. I would add that obfuscation or outright lying, although perceived by some diplomats as part and parcel of their role in communicating, are actually tactics I abhor, and which on occasion I have challenged, whether publicly or privately. Of course, when speaking truth to power, one must be prepared for the possible consequences, which can result in temporary or long-term blacklisting and artificial or real hostile media campaigns, or even demotions or shortening of one's career. As a journalist, one should never be afraid to be the first to ask a question, nor in this forum, frankly, nor to ask a follow-up question if the response is inadequate. As an international civil servant, your job, among other things, is to ensure that your supervisors are thoroughly informed so that they and their bosses can make informed decisions. In other words, do not tell them what they need, do not tell them what they want to hear, but what they need to hear. My best bosses are those that understood that proviso, which was also contained, and this is very important and repeatedly forgotten by too many people. This was contained in the Brahimi report on UN peacekeeping in 2000, which was commissioned by the Secretary General of the UN at the time, Kofi Annan. One must understand that international organizations such as the UN or the EU and their affiliated agencies are only as strong as their most powerful member states want them to be. the United Nations was established essentially as a conference organizing body, although it subsequently entered the field of peacekeeping, which eventually became its largest and most costly element, with at any given time some 17 or so peacekeeping missions worldwide. Missions are only as effective as the wording of their mandates allow them to be. A mission with an excessively detailed mandate and no termination date will in the long run be a failed mission. And I'm afraid to say that's the case of the mission now in Kosovo. It was certainly not a failed mission in its first decade. A mission with a short mandate and an inadequate support from the host country, the neighboring powers, is doomed to be of only limited duration and value. That's the case of the UN mission in Nepal, UNMIN. A mission with a short mandate, the most effective missions are those with limited mandates, with clearly defined goals, deadlines, and termination dates. They're not great for developing, how should I put it? They're useful on your resume. They're very useful experience, but they're very brief. And you need your own exit strategy before you enter a short-term mission. Otherwise, unless you're a permanent staffer of the UN, it's just going to be a brief experience, but it doesn't necessarily lead anywhere. One of the most rewarding aspects of working in an international mission is working together with people from around the world. During my 14 years in Kosovo, I worked with large numbers of people with a vast diversity of backgrounds from all across Africa, Australasia, Latin America, as well as Europe and North America. They all had at least a master's degree. I was often pleasantly surprised at how intelligent and articulate so many of my UN colleagues were. Political ideological differences inevitably emerged at times, but were surprisingly rare. Personality differences, including blind careerism and ethno-linguistic cliques, Nordic, Francophone, Hispanic, Lusophone, Persian, and Russian, to name a few, could on occasion interfere with one's day-to-day work. But on the other hand, I would note that my own knowledge of certain languages, as well as my intellectual curiosity about various parts of the world that I had not visited, greatly helped avoid problems. Likewise, far too few UN staffers in Kosovo were able to communicate in the primary local languages, Serbian and Albanian. The very few so-called internationals, foreign staffers, who could communicate in both languages had a distinct advantage and were far less prone to partisanship than those who were reliant on interpreters, translators, and English speakers among the local population. In conclusion, my final words of advice are, when working in an international environment, try to be thoroughly informed, open-minded, transparent, and to the fullest extent possible, communicative in the languages spoken wherever you may find yourself. A degree in international relations and excellent spoken and written English are great first steps, but as you will learn sooner or later, they are insufficient in many parts of the world. Area or regional expertise is key.
Julian, thank you very much. Are you finished?
I am finished.
Okay, then I have a couple of questions to you. Please. Before we go to the audience.
Yeah.
And some reflections and remarks about your experience. Mm-hmm. I was in Gdansk in 1988, a year after Pope visited the place where he spoke with his famous speech, "Każdy ma swoje Westerplatte." Mm-hmm. Everyone has its own Westerplatte, referring to the place from where the World War II started in 1939 with the attack on Polish fortress by Germans, which the Poles protected fiercely and with all their um, spirit. And I remember that very well. I also remember that a year after, I visited Gdańsk a year after in 1988, and at that time it was very typical to watch the clashes between police and prayers at the Church of Saint Brigida, which was attended by Lech Walesa at that time. It was like a game between oppositionists, very seriously intended people who were throwing stones into police cars, and policemen were trying to escape. And it was clearly that this regime will not last too long in Poland. And when the changes came in 1989, to some of them, they were like a big surprise. To me, it was not a surprise because I watched that kind of scenes in Gdańsk, in Warsaw, and many other places in Poland. You are a specialist in Central Europe.
Yeah.
And I also worked and lived in Central Europe for quite a while, and was as a Russian, I was always quite surprised that Russians, in their majority, do not really know this region very well. Although places like Czech Republic, Hungary, and even Poland are quite popular places, destinations for Russian tourists to visit, at least before the pandemic and what we see today. My question to you would be mostly about, how to say, 30 years has passed since those more than 30 years have passed since the changes in Central and Eastern Europe. And now we are witnessing different trends. The generation of the revolutionaries that you mentioned, like Gavel or Dubček, is not alive anymore. A new generation of politicians came to replace them. And in many societies, like in Poland, Czech Republic, and Hungary, we are witnessing more autocratic changes that population is actually appreciating and is voting for the politicians who would be, to whom Gavel would be in opposition and to whom Walesa is in opposition.
Yeah.
So how would you evaluate, what would you say about why those changes took place? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, okay. There are obviously multiple causes. I would say at the outstart, though, that these societies, while not atomized, are definitely divided geographically and demographically. In the case of Poland, it's an east-west divide. In the case of Hungary and the Czech Republic, and to some extent Slovakia, it is urban, large city versus small town. I mean, you see this obviously in Russia to some extent as well, where populist politicians rely on the support of rural and small town voters, above all middle-aged and older voters, and are able, through populist policies, promises, payoffs, to buy support. But society is divided. Czech society, Polish society, Slovak society, and Hungarian society are all deeply divided. And this is not a situation where the status quo will prevail over the next few years. The current regime in Prague will be replaced in the next elections this autumn, in all likelihood, if one is to believe the current polls. The prime minister and president have proven themselves singularly incompetent, thoroughly lacking in empathy. And so the Czech Republic for several months had the worst record, not only in new cases per million inhabitants of COVID-19, but in deaths per million inhabitants. It is worse than the UK or the United States or just about anywhere else, with 27,500 deaths in a population of 10.5 million. Multiply that by 33 to compare with the United States, and it's shocking. So it will contribute to a change in the political landscape in the Czech Republic this autumn. In Slovakia, they have a far more responsive and responsible and empathetic head of state, President Čaputová. In Poland and Hungary, the regimes have succeeded in gaining control over most of the media and in making constitutional changes which will make it much harder to push them out of power. In contrast, the Czech Constitutional Court, or the Supreme Court, resolved earlier this year that the current election law is invalid because it's unfair, does not ensure an adequate distribution of votes because it uses a deformed element of, or a form of the D'Hondt form of proportional representation. So we'll see a more equitable distribution of seats in the parliament based on the vote. And the parties here are coalescing into coalitions because they understand that united you stand, divided you lose. So that, in short, is the response. There is, of course, in Prague and Brno and other cities, most other cities, not all, in the Czech Republic, a sense of nostalgia for the Havel era. There's also, frankly, a sense of nostalgia among one element of the population for the Habsburg era, that Czechoslovak independence or Czech independence has not solved many of the country's root problems, and that they were probably happier here in a multinational society.
Do you see any nostalgia for communist years?
No, only among those who benefited most, very poor, rural, landless peasants who somehow benefited and who may still not have gotten around to climbing on a bus and traveling a few hours to Austria or Italy or Germany to see the rest of the world. But they're a fraction.
In Prague,
the communists do not have a chance of getting much more. Until now, over the last 30 years, they've averaged about 13% of the vote, but they're down to below 8%. They'll squeak by in the next elections, but the Social Democrats are finished. They will not get past the 5% mark. So there is not much nostalgia in the communist era. Yes, prices were fixed, prices were low, but there was nothing to buy with the little money that one had. One could not speak up, one
Well,
could not travel freely, etc., etc.
Compared to the Soviet Union, it was
of course, it was a paradise.
lot of things to buy.
It was a paradise compared to the Soviet Union or Romania or Albania or Bulgaria, no doubt about it. But one still was severely limited in one's freedom of movement, provided one had an independent source of income because one was an artist or a composer or whatever. One could live a parallel life quite freely. But for those who are dependent on the state, they were also susceptible to manipulation, state security, and being forced to inform. And there was a vast number of informers in all walks of life, including the current Prime Minister, Andrei Babiš, whose code name was Buresh.
Okay.
And was an agent, full-fledged.
Okay. We probably could speak a lot to discussing the subjects, but we have to go to the audience that is listening to us and invite them to ask questions to you. Friends, do you have questions to Julian? Don't be shy, please.
My words exactly.
Yeah, probably they can write questions to the chat, and then later on, Julian will have those not postponed because we are limited in time.
Yeah,
sure, we can do that.
Yes, don't be shy. Put your questions, write your questions to the chat directly to Julian or to everybody. Julian will see them. Okay?
Yeah.
And find the time to answer.
Okay. I think in that case, we could go to the next presentation. And here we have the next speaker, which is Yelizaveta Yansina, right? How do I pronounce your name correctly? Yelizaveta.
Yes, it can be pronounced like this also.
How do you pronounce your name?
Yanzina.
Yanzina. Okay,
yeah.
I was trying to reach you by phone yesterday and today, but I failed. So to figure out what is the correct pronunciation of your name. But anyway, the next speaker is Yelizaveta, and she will make presentation about the prospects for the post-Soviet unrecognized republics becoming independent states. So what we have in mind here, I guess, it's Transnistria, it's South Ossetia, Abkhazia, and what else?
And Nagorno-Karabakh.
Okay. The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction. Today, I'm going to give a brief presentation regarding the post-Soviet region unrecognized states. So can you please switch the slide? And here you will see the map. And during the last 30 years, since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, many unrecognized states have emerged on the ex-Soviet Republic borders. Lacking political support from the international communities, de facto states face the growing risk of being recurred into violent crime and conflict. Thus, frozen conflicts threaten global security, and unrecognized states can become arms and drugs illegal trafficking hubs, since they are not controlled by state authorities and therefore get out of legal monitoring. Next, please. Thank you. So, of course, the role of Russia is significant throughout the entire post-Soviet space. As the legal successor of the USSR, Russia informally inherited the status of the leading country of in the region and the position of strong player. So the conflicts in the post-Soviet space related to the declaration of the statehood of Transnistria, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Nagorno-Karabakh, which you can see on the map, do not go without the participation or, in some cases, the mediation of Russia. Next. So Moscow being the capital of the USSR and the location of the central political leadership of the country was directly involved in the formation of the Union republics. And after the self-dissolution of the USSR, it may be associated with the ruling elite, which was unable to form the proper level of social unity and ensure the integrity of the inherited territories. So this stimulates it to be actively involved now in the foreign policy aspects of geopolitics. So today, self-proclaimed blame for all the troubles, but without clear evidence. They depend on their defender, who can use them to influence both regionally and globally. And these conflicts, frozen only in words, sometimes become hotspots of global geopolitics. Next, please. In the short term, the status quo remains the most likely scenario. The resolution of the conflict has actually been blocked for more than a quarter of a century for the self-proclaimed states. Moreover, there are several pitfalls, as the current situation is beneficial to a number of actors. The defending state retains its geopolitical influence. The elites of the self-proclaimed state, as well as the state from which they emerged, can legitimize a permanent state of emergency and retain expanded powers in a peaceful situation. And citizens from Transnistria, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia who have adopted Russian citizenship receive additional payments. And the last, please, the prospects of recognition of their real independence is fading day by day. Can you switch, please? Thank you. Thus, the unrecognized states of the former USSR represent the main risk of armed international conflicts on the European continent. They can quickly transform into zones of open armed confrontation as the regional context changes. So facing this threat, the attention and joint response of the international community is limited, and the OSCE is less involved than it was 10 years ago. The European Union does not yet have a clear and ambitious policy, and today, in order to resolve the issue of the unrecognized states of the former USSR, it is not so much the support of Russia that is required as the development of a consensus solution of the interested parties and the finding a confederal solution to involve the unrecognized territories in international interaction. So a comprehensive approach to conflict resolution needs to be developed. And in fact, the solution found for one of the conflicts may create a precedent that can be used by participants with similar territorial legal problems. Thank you for the attention, and I am eager to answer your questions.
Thank you for, well, you actually have 3 more minutes. We can ask you, the questions. I think it's a very good presentation, very interesting. But did you answer the question? Is there the opportunity for unrecognized republics to become independent states? What's your conclusion?
So, of course, there is an opportunity, but in my opinion, it's only a theoretical one. And unless such important players like European Union, Russia, and other parties reach an agreement, this prospect for unrecognized states is unachievable.
Julian, you want to?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Do you see a danger, a precedent-setting danger, that if the international community were to agree to the statehood, international recognition of these for breakaway areas. Obviously, the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh has changed significantly over the past 6 or 7 months, but and so it's no longer an issue. I mean, I would probably at this point take it out of the list, for better or worse. But there's a danger of a precedent for Donbass, or at least a part of it. There's a precedent for northern Kazakhstan. Where does this end? In the case of Kosovo, as a precedent-setting example, the international community, initially with Russia, but subsequently Russia took a different attitude from about 2005 onwards. Initially, the idea was this is a unique model that cannot serve anywhere else to be emulated, that it's not a frozen conflict. The conflict is over, was brief, extremely brief, was ended, and what the international community needed to do was allow for a permanent solution. Unfortunately, that was subsequently undermined by various parties, including Russia, for reasons that had nothing to do with Kosovo. And that brings me to the issue of these 3 or 4, I won't even call them statelets, but territories. Are they viable? Is the purpose of recognizing them to give Moscow 3 or 4 additional votes in the United Nations General Assembly? Isn't it really all about Russian foreign policy? It's not really about what's going on the territory of these 4 places.
Thank you, Julian. I see your point, and I, of course, agree that it's a piece of Russian policy, and this is a tool to prevent, for example, Georgia and Ukraine to go for NATO and the Western Bloc, and of course, this should be tackled, but at the same time, these states for now have no opportunity to become legally declared. And as you also mentioned, this is a Russian tool, and some actors benefit from these states being in the current position. So being unrecognized and being without official control.
I think it's a very good answer.
Excellent.
Very, very, very substantial and clear answer. Elizaveta, thank you very much. If we have questions to you, I think we'll use chat for if someone has questions. But I really appreciate your presentation. I liked it very much, and I wish you all the best in your next research of this subject.
Thank you so much.
The next speaker is Ruslan Stoyanov. Ruslan, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. We will have I think we will have an opportunity to discuss your subject, but at this time the floor is yours. You have 8 minutes, and the subject of your presentation is perspectives on practical republicanism in the era of new normalcy. This term new normalcy is very new to me, in fact.
Okay. Thank you for introduction. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today I'm going to tell about problems of practical republicanism in the era of new normalcy. Next slide, please. The phenomenon of the welfare state began to be actively introduced into socioeconomic practice during the Second World War in Europe and the United States of America, also in most of the countries of Asia and Africa. Influenced by the Soviet Union, the model of progressive welfare state was embodied in the most radical socialistic forms. In the second half of the 20th century, the welfare state was a de facto reality even in countries that were traditionally liberal. Next slide, please. But with the economic crisis of 1973, the welfare state model ran into difficulties. It turned out that the services provided by the state were too expensive, and besides, not all citizens were provided with them. Added to this fact was the crisis of the nationalized branches of national economies. And this event launched the process of liberalization of the economies. Moreover, with the collapse of the socialist camp, confidence arose that liberalism had established itself as a political theory that no longer had an alternative. Next slide, please. However, the 2008 economic crisis called into question the economic component of liberalism, and the recent events with huge protest actions in the USA, the political aspect also. In these conditions, republicanism has an opportunity to declare itself as a worthy alternative to liberal theory. However, before moving on to the problems of republicanism in the modern world, one should understand how republicanism relates to the institution of the state in general. Next slide, please. It is interesting that today the state is perceived by many as an ancient institution, but how then to explain the fact that in the very beginning of the 17th century, all states in the world occupied only from 2 to 3% of the globe, on the land on the globe. In fact, the state, which is a social apparatus of coercion, which forces people to adhere to the rules of life and society, is a relatively recent European invention. That's why traditional republic has never been a state. Mark Tully Cicero, for example, was talking not about state, but about res publica, which is translated as public matter or common seat. This detail means that the concept of state and republic are diametrically opposed to each other. And next slide. And it also means that, in fact, state always threaten individual freedoms of people. And even empirical researches support this thesis. As an example, let us take the history of the country which that was originally conceived as a Republican project. I mean the United States of America. American economist Robert Hicks suggested focusing on the size of government purchases of goods and services expressed as a percentage of GNP to record government growth. Research results you can see on the screen. Based on these results, Hicks formulated the ratchet effect theory. Once a crisis has passed, state power usually recedes again, but it rarely returns to its original levels. This means that each emergency leaves the scope of government at least a little wider than before. So with every crisis, state becomes bigger and bigger. You can see this from the first World War, Second World War, and so on. The influence of this trend negatively affects the quality of protection of private property rights and individual liberties. According to Hicks, the United States has long stopped to embody the values of personal freedom and private property that were, in fact, the cornerstone of an American political system. The state has also increased since the 1980s. In 2020, the share of the state in relation to GNP was approximately about 34%. In other words, Hicks' negative expectations were correct. Next slide, please. So, if the United States is no longer a republic, then what about other states? In fact, even in the modern world, there are societies that most closely correspond to the Republican ideals of civic virtues, freedom, and self-government. Switzerland is such a community. The political system of Switzerland is built in such a way that the central government has almost no influence on the lives of citizens, but only fulfills the will of the people. All citizens in their cantons vote on certain laws and can propose even their own projects to the government and take responsibility for the consequences of their decisions. The confederative structure of the country, its decentralization and small size make possible economic freedom and the participation of the civil sector in solving social and political problems. It means that the Republican tradition not only takes place in the modern world, it is implemented within the whole country. And next slide. So my thesis is that the question is not whether we are living in an era of a new normalcy or in a period of coronavirus pandemic, but will we continue to live as isolated individuals and allow the state to further seize power over us, or will we promote the ideas of self-government, free civil life, personal virtues, and will carry out appropriate reforms? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Julian, do you have questions? Please turn yourself.
Rather, not so much a comment as a question. I mean, I would debate or argue with the thesis that the United States is no longer a republic. I would say that there is a serious dispute, difference, political conflict underway in the United States over the fate of the republic, over the fate of democracy. At the moment, democracy and the republic are winning after a 4-year nightmare under Donald Trump. But as we see in the attempts by Georgia, Florida, Texas, and a number of other states, their state legislatures, to limit voting by minorities, to somehow created a two-tiered system of citizenship that certainly both democracy, representative democracy and the republic are threatened, but I wouldn't quite wave goodbye to the republic at this point. If you have any comment to response, I'd be very
okay. I have one comment. I would say that there is a big difference between liberalism and republicanism, and moreover, representative democracy isn't a Republican ideal. If we refer to ancient times, how republic and democracy were identified by Athens or ancient Rome Republic, because when I talk about Republican ideals, I say that all the citizens have a participation in political processes. But in modern republics, which were established after the French Revolution of Great French Revolution of 1789, we don't have republic anymore. We have just two classes, I would say, of citizens and of deputies, which take part in legislative measures, but not the whole society. When we see example of Switzerland, we see a rare example of direct democracy, and that is what rather more close to the ideal of republic, in fact. because all citizens influence the policy of the country directly.
True, but I mean, if we're limiting ourselves to local communities in one half canton and one canton in Switzerland, that's not very impressive. I mean, that leaves out 98% of the country. That functions on a limited basis where you have a tiny population that is comparative with city-states in ancient Greece. But we're talking about the 21st century. So
yes.
Are you that would suggest that the ideal of a republic is thoroughly unworkable on a state level in the 21st century, or we have to redefine what it is to be a republic based on 1789, but also on the United States Constitution and its Bill of Rights and subsequent amendments, as well as on a few other republics in the meantime, such as the Federal Republic of Germany. So I would avoid limiting myself to ancient Greek definitions. The world has changed a lot in the past 2,500 years.
Well, as a moderator, I must interrupt this discussion because we are going beyond our time limit, and especially since the next speaker will be speaking also about problems of the United States, and we'll touch upon the same subject and same topics. It's Stanislav Khudenko. Stanislav, are you there? Stanislav, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. What I'm going to say, it's completely opposite to what Ruslan just said. But
well, so let me introduce you first. So the next speaker is Stanislav Khudenko, and his subject is the victory of American democracy over political power in post-electoral period. Please, Stanislav, the floor is yours.
Sounds too dramatic, yes. Also, and a small disclaimer that in my speech there will be a lot of retelling of historical facts from this period, but I think it is important to say what happened exactly. So. In 2020, presidential election in the USA became a serious challenge for American democracy and its institutions. President Donald Trump made many statements and took many actions that threaten American institutes and can be considered as populistic ones. Next slide, please. Immediately after preliminary election results started to appear, Trump started to tweet a lot about it. Many times his tweets were calling to stop vote counting. In specific areas. So, needless to say that in these areas, Trump was starting to lose the majority. These tweets, they undermine and discredit confidence in the Electoral Institute, and also. Trump started to heavily criticize the electronic vote, though he did not do that in 2026. About that, statements about Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear
yes,
you. Don't worry.
Rigid elections. He said, for example, that 50,000 thousands of voters who got wrong absentee ballots. Nevertheless, not a single court found any evidence of such accusations. Even the Supreme Court refuses to take up Trump's suit about Wisconsin election results, even though Democratic associated justices are minority in the court. Identical decision happened in case of redefining elections in Texas. The Republican majority in the Supreme Court made many experts in political science concerned about court's potential loyalty to Donald Trump, but the court remained impartial, and so the Institute of Court has fought this political power as well. Next, please. The most dangerous attack on USA's democracy is the storming of United States Capitol on January 6th. That day started with Proud Boys rally, which consisted of Trump supporters whose final destination was the Capitol. In 12 o'clock, Donald Trump started his Save America rally speech near the White House. And during the speech, Trump said many streamlined things like, you are allowed to go by very difficult rules, and we fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And well, other similar statements. These phrases cannot be called a direct call for an assault, but according to the experts in political science like Michael McFaul or Jill Dougherty, in this in this context, it is difficult to interpret these phrases differently. It is important to say that many protesters arrived to the Capitol not with peaceful intentions. They were chanting, invade the Capitol or storm the Capitol. And so the riot has started. It lasted for 4 hours. That's all we know. We all know that two people were murdered, and so this was a serious challenge for the American democracy as well. And now, next slide, please. Here you can see the opinion polls provided by YouGov and the Ipsos, which show Americans' view on the Capitol storming. As you can see, the majority of respondents do not support the rioters. Marist Institute of Public Opinion and other researchers present similar results. This means that Trump's attempt to overstep the democratic system using his own power as a politician, it did not succeed. Next slide, please. Despite the fact that Trump lost this war, the consequences of his actions continue to influence American politics and will continue to do so in the future. The best example of this, it was mentioned today, by the way. It is a recently passed Republican law in Georgia, one of the USA states, not the country, that may and it makes more difficult to vote. Nevertheless, the American system withstood and escaped with only minor damage, from which many experts predict one way or another will recover. So thank you for all the attention. That's all I had for today.
Stanislav, thank you very much. It is a very interesting presentation that is in fact counterbalancing the previous one. But I appreciate your efforts and time to make this presentation. I just got a message from our organizers that we have to go through the poll that everyone needs to fill in as a result of this session. Do you have the link or QR code to vote for the best speakers of the session? If you have it, please work with it and fill it in. And since we don't have too much time, I will not open the floor to the questions to Stanislav. And if you have questions to Stanislav, please send it to him directly. And we will go to the next speaker, which is Oja Sonali. Are you here, Oja?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Sonali. It's Sonali.
So you say Oja Sonali.
Oja Sonali.
Okay. May I ask you what is the origin of this name?
It's Indian. So my dad's Indian and my mom's Russian. Therefore,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. You have a very topical subject for presentation, and we are looking forward for your presentation, which is in a way continues the previous two. And I watched your presentation yesterday. It's very well done, very serious, and the floor is yours. Please show us this your report and your presentation.
Thank you very much. So my name is Sonali, and I am the second-year student of IBS Ranepa, International Affairs. So could I have the next slide, please? So this is the thesis plan that I'm going to go through. The next slide. So first off, I would want to start off with Joe Biden and his status on the COVID-19 in America. And later on, I would go to his stand on COVID globally. So the main aspects of his politics, according to the COVID-19, you can see on the slide, but I would want to make more detailed comments to point out the amount of money that is invested in the COVID. So first of all, 25 billion in vaccine manufacturing and distribution plan that will guarantee it gets to every American cost-free. Plus, the Biden's administration ensures that politics plays no role in determining the safety and efficacy of any vaccine. So they're going to follow 3 principles. That is, they will follow science, they will make sure that everything is public, and that a written report for public review and permit is given. So the scientists appear before the Congress and speak publicly. Could I have the next slide, please? Rejoining the global fight, as we all know, Biden's predecessor, Trump, last July, he began withdrawing from the World Health Organization after he accused it of ignoring reports of the virus spreading in China. Soon after, 750 global health experts wrote a letter to the US Congress saying the accusations were unfounded and that the withdrawal will likely cost lives. So, which is why Biden, on the contrary, his strategy is to make sure that the United States will rejoin WHO so that it's more equipped to respond to health emergencies in the future. So the plan also states that the country will join the COVAX, that is the new vaccine that is being manufactured, the COVAX initiative, which aims to provide vaccines around the globe and will support its research and development program. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So next, I would want to comment on Biden's strategy on the Transatlantic Alliance. So as opposed to his predecessor from the Republican Party, the US is fully committed to NATO, and the president, because he believes that Donald Trump had railed against the alliance for 4 years, which provoked many unnecessary problems. So, as Biden said, the United States will work closely with the European Union partners to meet the range of shared challenges we face. President Biden told this in the Munich Security Conference on Friday at his first speech, aimed at the world leaders since taking the office, after taking the office. So also the President Biden underlined that he keeps faith in NATO's Article number 5, calling it our own unshakable vow. Also, President Biden and his administration is getting close to ending the war on terror that has lasted for almost 2 decades, noting that Washington will make sure Afghanistan never again provides bases for terrorist attacks against the US, and also noting that European partners they will work together in making sure that no radical Muslim religious groups...
Sonali, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We don't have too much time. Can you go to the next slide and speak about Biden's policy towards Russia?
Yeah, of course. So could I have it? Thank you. As for Russia and Biden's politics towards our country, I would want to outline the interview with ABC News on Wednesday on ABC News when Biden said that Putin will not only pay a price for undermining Biden's candidacy in the U.S. election. Plus, when Biden was asked if Putin is a killer, Biden said that he thinks so. So his comments stood in stark contrast with his predecessor, Donald Trump, who was often accused of going soft on Putin. As for Russia's reaction, I can say that Konstantin Kosachev, a deputy head at the Russian parliament's upper house, described Biden's comment as a watershed comment and demanded that the Washington apologize because such statements are unacceptable in any circumstances and will inevitably sharply damage our bilateral ties. So even though there are such chilly and provocative comments from the American side, Washington and Moscow are still willing to cooperate on shared interests. And it is important that the countries continue to work together. As Putin said, we must continue our relations. They even have so the last time President Biden initiated a call, and now they would like to offer to continue their discussions. So altogether, despite the comments, the countries want to cooperate. So the next slide, please. Here, I will make it brief as quickly as possible, not to take time. So the Trump administration identified China as the greatest long-term competitor, and they have imposed quite a lot of tariffs. President Biden, on the other hand, will make sure is going to either partially or completely remove import tariffs. This is clear because the prices paid by the US consumers would fall, and in exchange, China would likely improve market access for American exports. So altogether, on a balance, we can expect a rhetorically more civil US-China relationship under Biden, including a willingness to engage on key international issues such as climate change and less emphasis on punitive tariffs. However, the US administration will maintain pressure over perceived intellectual property theft, and there will be no winding back to the clock of the President Obama era, as China is now seen as the direct competitor. So altogether, USA and China will cooperate on certain aspects, but not everywhere. So on this, I would like to end my presentation. If you have any questions, please do ask.
Yes, Sonali, thank you very much for your very substantial and interesting presentation. However, I would like to ask you the question about your angle on U.S.-Russian relations. You present us the facts that we all know from the recent past. But what is your forecast? What is your forecast for the future of U.S.-Russian relations under Biden? Very briefly, don't go into details. It's a huge subject. But what's your forecast, and what do you see any perspectives for the better future?
Well, personally, I think that there will be cooperation, but it will be not, I think it will be only on international and on the affairs that include many countries altogether. So maybe on ecology, maybe on terrorism, on radical religious groups. But if we are talking about definitely close economical or political relationships, I think that under Biden's administration, this will not be possible.
What do you think? What do you think is the main obstacle for the improving of relations between Russia and the United States?
I think it all goes back to the Cold War and quite many stereotypes of our Russian people today that we have towards America, even though it is changing, even though quite many people, many Russians do support America's policies, foreign policies. However, this still the image of USA as being our enemy from the period of the Cold War, it's still present, inevitably. As an example, I can say my grandparents, so it's quite common. So I think another few years or even decades have to pass before USA and Russia can actually become close allies.
Well, Cold War was a long time ago. Well, there are talks about conversations about current new Cold War. But how do you evaluate the role of Ukraine in U.S.-Russian relations?
So I think Ukraine is also one of the topics that is an obstacle for the U.S. and Russia relationships to becoming closer. Also here, I would want to outline the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula. So from the U.S. side, of course, Russia is being criticized for gaining back this territory. So I think Ukraine plus Crimea, these are the two geopolitical aspects that are the obstacles, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not going to torture you anymore, but thank you for your very interesting presentation. We unfortunately have very limited time. I appreciate your efforts and your very interesting presentation and speech. Good luck in your future research and work. We have the next speaker, Yuri Korinevsky. Yuri, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Good. You are here. You are there. Okay. Are you prepared to speak?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Good. Good. So it's my pleasure to introduce you. Yuri Korinevsky is the next speaker, and he will be speaking about pink tide in Latin America. Please.
Thank you very much. So, first of all, the pink tide is a perception of a turn towards left-wing governments in Latin American democracies at the beginning of the 21st century. This term was firstly used in 2004 during presidential elections in Uruguay when Larry Rother, a New York Times reporter in Montevideo, characterized Tabaré Várquez as leader of Uruguay as not so much a red tide as a pink one. The term seems to be a wordplay based on red tide. It's a biological phenomenon, with the red color as an association of communism, which is replaced with the lighter tone of pink to indicate the less radical ideas of the candidate. The prerequisites of the left tide were formed in Latin America in the 20th century. Throughout the century, a region plagued by inequality, poverty, and authoritarianism has seen the rise of various leftist movements. In response, the United States launched a campaign against communist and socialist parties in this region and also began to support local right-wing dictators. The apogee of this struggle was Operation Condor, during which right-wing dictators, with the support of CIA, killed up to 80,000 people of left views. With the exception of Colombia and Costa Rica, virtually all Latin American countries had at least one United States-supported dictator. The collapse of socialist camp changed the geopolitical situation, and many left-wing movements either became less radical or completely collapsed. Against this background, the United States stopped considering the left as a threat and stopped fighting them. However, the region's economic and social problems have not gone away. Many leftists who had moved from armed struggle to electoral politics began to gradually increase their popularity. The general accepted view of the beginning of the pink tide is considered to be in 1999, when Hugo Chavez won the presidential elections in Venezuela. He was followed by leftist politicians Lula da Silva and Evo Morales, who came to power in Brazil in 2003 and Bolivia in 2006, respectively. Later, these three left Latin American leaders would be called Three Musketeers. After them, left-wing and center-left parties came to power in Ecuador, Nicaragua, Argentina, and etc. Against this background, Venezuela and Cuba created in 2004 the Bolivian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, which a short form is ALBA. This is an organization, is an economic and political association of countries with left-wing governments. Nowadays, there are 10 member states. The rapid rise in the popularity of the left also connected with rapid rise in the prices of energy carriers, oil, gas, and etc., which were rich in these countries. The increase in export profit allowed left-wing governments to rapidly increase social spendings, and that's why they strengthened their positions. In the next 10 years, energy prices began to decline, which triggered a crisis in some Latin American countries and undermined confidence in governments. In 2013, Hugo Chavez died. His successor, Nicolás Maduro, did not have the charisma of Chavez and could not cope with the crisis in Venezuela. From that moment on, the popularity of the left began to decline. In 2014, mass opposition protests began in Venezuela and Brazil. In the next year, the candidate of the right-wing alliance, Mauricio Macri, won the presidential elections in Argentina. The Economist stated that the pink tide ended. In 2016, Lula da Silva's successor, Dilma Rousseff, was outset as president on an impeachment trial. In 2018, Lula himself was found guilty of corruption and sentenced to 9 years in prison. In 2019, the last musketeer, Evo Morales, left the position of the president because of opposition protests. Thus, most of the left-wing governments were replaced by right-wing policies, and a long political crisis began in Venezuela. By analogy with the pink tide, the process of right-wing forces coming to power was called the blue tide, because blue is a traditional color of right-wing powers in Latin America. However, you may see the picture of center-left and left politicians in Latin America, and it is currently possible to observe the second wave of the left tide. In 2018, left-wing politician Andrés Manuel López Obrador came to power in Mexico. In 2019, the left won elections in Argentina and Panama. In the last year, the candidate of the Evo Morales party, Luis Albert Arce Catacora, won elections in in Bolivia and came to power. And the party of Evo Morales came to power again. Moreover, according to opinion polls, we may see that nowadays in Ecuador, Andrés Arauz, which is also a left-wing politician, leading in the presidential elections, and he won the first tour, and the next tour will be in this month, and he's leading. In the upcoming presidential elections in Chile, according to opinion polls, the candidate from Communist Party, Oscar Daniel Jade, is leading. And finally, on March 9th of this year, Lula da Silva was exonerated in a corruption case, and immediately after this news, his rating rose sharply and already exceeds the rating of the current president, Jair Bolsonaro. All this can be interpreted as a new wave of pink tide. Perhaps this wave is even more powerful than the previous one, as left-wing ideas are beginning to dominate even in traditionally right-wing countries like Mexico or Brazil and Chile. So that's all what I wanted to say. Now I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It is a very interesting presentation with a lot of interesting facts. I remember very well the visit of Hugo Chavez to Moscow in 2008. At that time, I worked at Interfax, and I was supposed to cover his visit to Moscow. He had a press conference at President Hotel on Большая Yakimanka, and it was like a big show, you know, like a carnival. He was surrounded by the ladies in military uniform with the orange berets. So it was quite a performance. If you don't mind, I will go to the next speaker, and if we have
Piotr, Mr. Tremishkin, sorry for interrupting you. On the behalf of our organizing committee, let me introduce another activity. All of the audience, all the speakers are going to vote for the best speaker of the first session.
Well, I think I have announced that already.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I mean, like, so do it. So there is a link in the chat, and also you can download a QR code. So speakers and participants in audience will be active. And after the last speaker's presentation, we will get the results. And the only one speaker, the best one, will get a session, vocational session with Julian Neglia, Mr. Julian. So and in the second session there will be 2 speakers. So because it's a large, it's a larger panel at all. So good luck. Good luck. So sorry for interruption.
Okay, now we are going to have the last presentation, which is quite interesting. I watched it yesterday with a great interest, and I hope you will share this interest of mine. Kirill Kozakov. Kirill, are you here?
Kirill?
Yes, I'm here.
Good, good. Please speak about the influence of non-governmental paramilitary organizations on business processes, on experience of Latin America and the Middle East.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. When next slide, please. As you know, when non-governmental paramilitary organizations don't have any strict definition. To my point of view, these organizations is military political associations, and they formally independent of the internal and external.
Там назначено 14:30. Там все нормально.
Irina, please unmute your sound. Irina. Kirill, sorry for that. I will.
No problem. No problem.
30, ну там как пойдет, нам еще пока подойдет тот модератор, он тоже с причудами. Вот.
I suppose the administrator can switch off the sound.
Yes, please do that. Please do that. The moderator or an organizer of this session. So please do that quickly. We do not have much time. So Mr. Cheremushkin, please do that. Can you hear me? So a bit sorry for that. So give me a sec.
What is it?
Mr. Irina, please mute your sound. Mute your sound, please.
Oh, sorry.
So sorry for that, Kirill. Go on.
No problem. So I believe that I can continue. As I have said, according to my point of view, the non-governmental paramilitary organizations in the modern world are military political associations. So if you analyze the different examples of this organization, like Hamas, Hezbollah, or FARC, you can find that they combine the methods of the traditional wars, some partisan wars, terrorism, terrorist methods, and they also take a part in the peaceful political process, like political parties, and sometimes they are similar with criminal associations. So the next slide, please. I have found two key factors for analyzing this problem. First, it's availability and quality of funding sources for this organization, and the integration of non-governmental paramilitary organizations into the political system. Next slide, please. First model. If the organization has a problem with funding resources from some using some like peaceful and official methods, and don't have any governmental support, they try to communicate with business using their power. For example, many years, many businessmen paid 2% reversionary tax to the organization FARC in Colombia. Next slide, please. The second model is the combine of the first and third model. In this model, you have opportunity to communicate with government, or this organization is a part of the government. However, they have problems with resources. Great example of this model is the Houthis, or official name Ansar-Allah, in Yemen. Now they are part of a political party in Yemen. However, they have continued their war with official government and Saudi Arabia coalition, so they need many resources. And they starting to collect money from the nation for ballistic missile program, and local businessmen can give them money using the telephone call or with some special events. Example of these events you can see at slide. And next slide, please. And third model for the rich and big organizations like Hezbollah in Lebanon. They pattern national business structures. In slide, you can see the office of the Al-Hassan Association. This organization is similar with the bank. As you know, Lebanon has many problems with economy, and the Hezbollah supports the local business using their own bank structure. Like the most important is the Al-Hassan Association. So the next slide, please. Thank you for your attention. If you want to continue discuss with this topic or other topics about non-state paramilitary organizations, you can see contact with me by email or Instagram or Telegram. Thank you for your attention.
Kirill, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question to you. What do you think about Kurds and their paramilitary units in Turkey and Iraq? Do they have any? Would you include them into your project as an organization that is dealing with business projects, or is supporting business projects?
Thank you for your questions. We need to understand where Kurds organization in Iraq is very big organization, is the part of the local government, and they can communicate with local Kurds like government, and they can support their business or can collect official donors. So it's for Iraq, it will be combining of the second and third model. If we discuss the Kurds organization in Turkey, they are not powerful, and they are more similar with the terrorist organization. That they are more the terrorist organization than non-paramilitary organization. So they also have so we can't use the model for the Workers' Party of Kurdistan and Turkey.
We cannot
use this model because, according to my point of view, this organization isn't a non-state paramilitary organization. It is a classic terrorist organization.
Okay, Kirill, thank you very much. I really liked your presentation. It's very topical and very very appropriate to the problems of the current world and to the subject of our session. I must stop here because we need a break for the for lunch, and probably the next session, as we decided with organizers, will start at 14:40. So you would have time for a little break and rest and food. I'm saying goodbye to you. This session, the next session, will be moderated by Alexander Chekhov, and I'm saying goodbye to you at this time. Thank you very much.
So goodbye, Piotr, but the audience and the speakers, please stay here because we have the results of the voting for the best speaker. So let me share the screen. So Kirill, please turn off your demonstration of your screen, so I will be able to do that. Okay, thank you. So as you see, colleagues, the best speaker of the first session is Hudenko Stanislav. So Stanislav, congratulations. So you will get so you will get a certificate of the best speaker of the session, like with honors. So other speakers, don't worry. You will get a certificate of the speaker, but you, Stanislav, will get like certificate of the best speaker of the session. So congratulations. And as a prize, you will have a vocational session with Mr. Julian Negale. So a great honor for you. So, and congrats.
Thank you very much.
Sorry,
no worries.
I want to say something. Probably we will think the organizing committee together with the experts, because all of you here were really brilliant. Probably we plan to have one winner in this session, but probably we will add another one or two. We'll decide, because you really deserve it, right? Those who came the second and the third. I'm not promising anything now, but probably we will consider it. Stay tuned, as I asked you, because we're really out of time. But no, we're not. So probably we tend to start in time for 2:30 or 4:30, but please don't be late. Have a snack and don't leave. Give support to you.
You can have a snack right now, so I have a cup of coffee. You can follow my example and have a drink.
Yes.
That's okay.
Okay. Don't switch off. Stay tuned.